What up friends, Liron here, and today we're looking at some of my oldest first paintings. What up friends, Liron here, thank you for joining me in another video. As I mentioned, today we will look at some of my very first paintings. Now I had to really dig back and it was hard for me to find the first, technically official paintings, like maybe 4 or 5 first ones, but I did find ones about a month into watercolor, some maybe 2 weeks, I guess. So I'm just going to go over them and show you them one by one. Some of these you may think are really good, some of these you may not think are really good. Now remember, I had a lot of drawing and sketching experience, so sometimes when you do a really good drawing, it's hard to completely mess it up using the watercolor, especially when you're timid, and I will mention that and expand on that a little later on. Okay, but for now I just want to share with you some of them. Some of them are not so good, some of them are okay, and some of them I'm aware are pretty good for a month into watercolor. Okay, so let's change the angle and take a look at these. Okay, so let's look at some of these paintings. Now I have to say I'm always excited doing these videos because it's just so nostalgic. I just go back in memory lane and I see a lot of old work, and it's really interesting to go back and look at old works you saw, because you can even recognize already hints of your natural style, because what you used to do in the beginning before you had any past influence, any new influences, is a very good indication of your style or maybe your preferred method of working. Some of these were done on a very bad paper, not so high quality, using not so high quality paints, so I think it's just really interesting to see. So these were kind of a typical landscape paintings I used to do in the beginning. You can see it's very messy. I think they have a lot of charm to them, by the way, and I think they look beautiful. I do think I already, because I had experience in drawing, so it helped a lot. But just the work with the paint is not so good, because you can see there's a lot of bleeding in, and just everything is very messy. So it does have some kind of magic to it. I definitely appreciate these kinds of paintings. Just there's a lot of work to be done on the technical side of just learning how to better work with the medium. Okay, this one is when I really started painting outside. This is, you can see here, it's from July 2016, and this was a house in my neighborhood, and the previous place I lived. And you can see that there's a bit more magic to it, I think, because you can see some of the light and things casting. I remember when I finished this one, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. But now that I look at it, it doesn't read that well. You can see the sky is just a very messy wash. There isn't enough, just evenness and flow to it. But still very good beginning, I think. Now I want to show you a few examples of some things that I consider just really bad and I gave up on midway. Now again, mind you, I have an experience in drawing, and so some of these you will say, well, it's a good drawing, but the paint work itself is not so good. So let me zoom in just a bit. So anyway, yeah, I can't believe I zoomed in on that, but this one is just very interesting. I started it and I just gave up on it midway. I didn't know back then how to recognize the values very properly, so it's just a bunch of kids. I remember I found this picture, I think it's somewhere, maybe in Brazil or something like this, and they're just sitting around, and I tried getting, the street right, the buildings right, but there's not a lot of sense of depth to this one. I do think the drawing is kind of cool, kind of cute. But yeah, I remember I looked at this and I was like, no, this is not happening, and I just threw it away. Look at all the color here. And again, this was done on, I think this is a Cotman, very cheap paper. It's very thin. It's 140 GSM, I believe. So not that good. And the paint also was like the oldest Van Gogh paint I used to use, and you can see all of the blossoms and everywhere, so just not very even work, not very watercolor-ish. Next up, okay, we have this scene, which is a nice one. Again, there's not much going on. I didn't know how to get the details in. The drawing is okay. but I found it very challenging when I knew I was going to paint. I found it very challenging to even get a proper drawing going because I kept thinking how I should do it and what should I change, etc. So yeah, not that very good. And again, ignore the quality of the drawing itself. If you're not experienced with drawing, just look at the watercolor and you'll see it's very basic and not that good. Okay. Next up, and this is funny. I decided to paint my workspace. Let me zoom out a bit. So I decided to paint my workspace, and this went into one of my books, the book on urban sketching. So it's just a very interesting experience, my workspace be like. And there's the classical hat that I like to wear. You can see the setup of my brushes back then. I'm really pleased with this one. I remember finishing it and I was like, whoa, this is really good. But again, I couldn't even get an even wash like this, even if my life depended on it. Even in this small surface, it was just a big challenge for me, okay? So this really takes me back to the beginning, and yeah, just very interesting. Again, more illustrative than classic painting, I guess. Here we have one of the first things that did click for me. The first kind of cityscape or kind of view scene that I drew that really connected, because finally I gave enough value range. Okay, it could be better, of course, but you can see here this one is fairly darker than this one. And again, remember, with the low quality paints, some of them are really hard to produce a dark value with. So I was really struggling with that. Another thing is that I wasn't using complementaries to shade, so it's just like yellow and then brown and brown and brown. If I would use maybe blues here, it could have been much better, of course. You can see there's, again, a lot of blossoms going on here. Not that good of control of the wash. The sky, again, you can see these streaks of color. But overall, this was the first one I looked at and I was like, there's something here. Okay, there is some magic here. You can see the shadows here look good as well. So this was very interesting. Then I was over ambitious and I just drew out a huge scene. And then I had no idea how to paint it. So what you see here may look kind of nice, but I was going for like a look like, you know, more realistic, I guess. So this was a very humbling experience for me. And this one is done on a thicker paper, actually, that's a little better. So yeah, it just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter the materials, but it's more about the artist and the skills. You can see a lot of bleeding here with the colors, a lot of weird mixes. I just had no idea how to approach this kind of scene. And to tell you a secret, even now I sometimes don't have an idea. Okay, so, but this is just a good example of that. Now, oddly enough, with people, I had this natural knack to drawing them. So this is the first kind of painting that I was like, bam, that's a good one. So let me zoom out just a bit. So this was the first one that I really felt like there's something good here. And if you kind of squint, you can see all the shadows and the lights, and you can see the shape of the face. There's the shadow under the hair. This is the shoulder. You can kind of make up what's going on in here, which is why I was very pleased with this. I remember I used this flat brush here that I haven't used for so long. I used it for these areas, and I remember, I think this is when I started finding out about Stan Miller's videos, which are incredible here on YouTube. I may link, if I remember to, in the corner. Stan Miller has just a really good approach that is so simple but is really the basics of watercolor. And with this one I finally felt like I got it, and it's funny because it's based on a black and white picture. Okay, so I added the color, I chose the colors, and I really went with what he teaches. He says the color doesn't matter this much. It's all about getting the values right, getting the drawing right. And he's repeating that all the time. Get your values right, get your drawing right. You will hear it again and again and again if you check out his channel. So he has a very good sort of program for beginners here on YouTube. So this is the first one that really connected. And really you can see with portraits, I kind of was able to, and this is again, this is from June, so it was very surprising to me because I really just started. Let me zoom in a bit. And you can see how there's a lot of inconsistencies with the wash. It's not that even, but the general understanding of light and shadow is still here. And this is one good thing about it. Of course, the drawing itself isn't that accurate. Her nose is a little too long, lips too big. There's a lot to correct here, but just you can immediately read this. And I think it has a lot of charm and a lot of magic that even now I lack sometimes. Because this was when I really just worked on the basic skills. So I think I'm now going through a trend of going back to that place. And finally, this one, which I really like. This is, I believe, an Israeli singer, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot his name. But this is kind of the first one that I felt like I really nailed it. Now looking back, of course, there's a lot to correct. It's very boring in terms of the colors, you know, just using the same colors for the shadows, and you can see this here as well, just darker grays, darker browns or skin tones. So I had a lot to learn back then, but still you can see some of the beginning of the watercolor magic, let's just call it that way. So these are some of my first paintings. Now this may look really really threatening to someone who's just getting into watercolor, but remember, I had a lot of drawing experience when I started with watercolor. And also I want to take you back to this one, for example. So just very simple, very messy. So I had a lot of both worlds, you know, just things that I had no idea how to do. No idea how to paint, how to get the proper value range, how to get a feeling of depth, you know, which actually there is a bit of it here. But really, yeah, I searched far and wide. I couldn't find like the very first maybe 1, 2, 3 paintings. I couldn't find them. So these are this one's about a month in. This one also is about a month in. So yeah, I started around May, June. So yeah, this is it. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my very first works. This connects really well with my video on the worst paintings. So these are, I notice I don't consider them worst, I just consider them really old. Okay, so because they're good. I'm well aware that these are pretty good, you know. You can say whatever you want, depends on your perspective, but for a month or two in, it's really good. But a lot of it is just the drawing, you know. I think Joseph's book, which said that if the drawing is really good, you can't mess it up too much. You can mess it up, but not too much, okay? So anyway, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's change the angle and wrap up this video. So friends, I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my really old, some of the first paintings. I have to say this one is my top favorite. I love this one. I will always love this painting. It's the first time I was like, man, I'm starting to get this. I'm starting to get the perception, the visual perception required to do this. So I want you to really use this video to encourage yourself, okay? I know some of these may look like they're pretty high level, but remember, the drawing is good. If the drawing is good to begin with, the watercolor just sort of rests on it. It may ruin it, but for the most part, especially if you're very timid, you'll just kind of cover it up and it won't look as good, but still will look okay. So remember, I've been drawing ever since I can remember myself from when I was like 4 or 5. And there's a lot of experience going behind that, but the painting part was relatively new to me. So I really want you to take this as motivation and see that the start is really humble. And like, I practice every day for about 1.5 years now, and I still just start to get it, that I have so much yet to learn. Okay, so there's just so much, it never ends. So this is what I want you to take from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, subscribed to my channel. I have quite a few videos that are similar to this one, where I show my old paintings, my recent paintings, my worst paintings, my best paintings. There's a lot of these going on here. So I think there's a playlist called Painting Reviews, and you can find it there, like most of my videos related to just reviewing my own work. Okay, so subscribe to my channel, follow me on Snapchat and Instagram, where I will share, I do share a lot of recent updates, more personal updates, things from my day-to-day life. Sorry about that. and just fun things, okay? So don't forget to follow me there, and I will see you again in the next video.